Paul Kieltyka is head of the Summit Y, which is a huge organization. And he started out his career with the Y over 20 years ago in various New Jersey Ys, and he worked his way up. And he's become a very strong leader of the Summit Y, a very successful enterprise. What I didn't know is that he's a lacrosse coach. He's a lacrosse coach and has been for a long time. He was a star player at Keene University. And right now, he's doing a stint as assistant coach for the Cougar coaching staff. And maybe you'll tell us just a little bit about that. But he was a star lacrosse player. He's coached. He's, again, a very strong wine leader. He's talked to us before. And he lives in Scotch Plains with his wife, Maggie, and their two daughters, Megan and Lauren. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. And oh God, great to see you again. I'm glad we could get together today. So I will tell that lacrosse story. I grew up in Westfield, played lacrosse when it started in the 70s, and actually was part of the first two state championship lacrosse teams at Westfield. And went to Keene and played there and fell in love with coaching, and was actually head coach back in the 90s. I did a stint part-time while I was launching my Y career. And now I volunteer coach. And luckily over at Keene and Union, we have night practices so I can do my day job where I get paid. And I'm happy to be a volunteer assistant and love working with the kids. So, so the topic today is maybe it's appropriate because we're all on Zoom, and seems like Zoom was born out of COVID. And here we are at the end of February, March, where we're talking about the 3-year anniversary, really, of COVID starting to have an impact on our entire world, let alone the Summit area. As I spoke about last time, when I spoke to you over the summer about the history of the Y, real quick, we were founded in 1886 as the Summit Y. Many of you may know the Summit Y on Maple Street in Summit, but we also have a large childcare center on Morris Avenue in Summit, as well as a facility in Berkeley Heights. And over the years, the YMCA has gone through the same trends and waves that we heard a lot of the birthday boys talk about today. And it's always been a responsive organization where it has been there to serve the community in times of need. The Y was very prevalent in all the world wars, World War I, World War II, Korean War. The Y was very prevalent during multiple natural disasters and continues to be today. And of course, the Y has been very prevalent in culture and sports, inventing basketball, volleyball, indoor swimming lessons, summer camping. Father's Day was founded at the Y. Locally here at the Summit Area Y, financial trends have also been interesting. And I share that because as I get into my presentation about COVID, you're going to hear about what happened to us financially. And as a nonprofit organization, as this group knows fully, we are not out to make a profit. We are not out to serve our shareholders. We are simply out not to lose any money. And at the end of the day, we're perfectly happy to have $1 left in the bank. Fortunately, unfortunately, through the years, the Summit Area Y has gone through some challenging times. But since I would say 2007, 2008, and I have been here since 2014, the financial health of the Summit Area Y has been very strong. And what I mean by that is we have been able to not lose money on a year-to-year basis, and we've been able to reinvest any money we are over margin back into our community, back into our facilities, which is obviously success. as we define it financially. So, taking you back to 2018, 2019, this organization committed to building a new facility in Berkeley Heights. And again, Peter's right and he's wrong. We are the Summit Y, but we're really the Summit area Y. So we serve 7 communities: Berkeley Heights, New Providence, Summit, Milburn, Short Hills, Gillette, Sterling, and Springfield. And Berkeley Heights was an area that for a long time we have wanted to have a larger facility that could serve more people in that region of our service area. And so we were able to establish a site on Locust Avenue, lease from the township of Berkeley Heights. We started construction in October of 2018 and planned for about 16, 18 months of a brand new $40,000 or 40,000 square foot complex, $13 million budget, including an outdoor pool, included a fitness center, gymnasium, childcare centers, multi-purpose rooms, not unlike what most of you have seen in your days as YMCAs or community centers. We had the good fortune of, we wanted to open up on January 1st, 2020. We didn't make it, but we opened up on February 6th, 2020. And we were cautiously optimistic that this facility was going to fill up with new members. And in the Y world, we count membership units as our main metric. So just for clarification, if you have a single adult or senior membership, that counts as 1 unit. If I have a family membership, which my family, including myself, is 4 people, that counts as 1 unit. So even though that's a total of 5 people, yours and my memberships, we count them as 2 units. When we opened up Berkeley Heights, we had a rental facility on Springfield Avenue for 25 years previously, and closed that obviously when we opened up a new building on February 6, 2020, we had 1,600 units. By March 18th of 2020, we had crossed over 2,000 units. We had quickly 400 new membership units had joined our brand new building. And it was getting rave reviews and everything was wonderful. I'll bring up March 18th because on March 19th, we closed. And many of us remember those times. I remember it very well because it was over the weekend. It was St. Patty's Day. It was, everybody knew something was happening, but nobody knew what the consequence was going to be. And we had decided almost concurrently with the state of New Jersey. The local health officials had not entered the picture yet. But we had decided that that Monday, 19th, we would close. And so that's exactly what we did. Almost every Y in the state closed then. And obviously the dominoes fell during that week as executive order after executive order came down. So 5 weeks after we opened, we closed a brand new building that still had numerous bills to be paid from the construction, the $13 million project. And while we had a majority of that money, cash flow wise, we were expecting memberships throughout the spring, the growing membership to help support paying those bills, and that was now not going to happen. So I look back at phase 1 of that COVID, which to me is from March of 2020 through May of 2020. Let me refresh for you exactly what happened. Our Summit building, our Berkeley Heights building, our child care center, the Learning Circle, all shut down. So all of our buildings, our corporate office here in Summit, everything was shut down. We sent everybody home. At the time, we had 545 staff. I believe it's about 80% of that staff was part-time, but 20% was full-time. After paying people for the remainder of March, and again, looking back, we were hoping this shutdown, that the worst case would only be for 2 weeks. Obviously, we were quite long. We laid off all of the staff except for 165 people. Majority of my full-time, and obviously a large number of part-time staff were laid off. And quickly, as we exited out of March into April and May, and nothing was changing with the environment, there were no clues that we would be able to open. We realized we had to change our focus. And so we came up with a new tagline. Our doors may be closed, but our mission is still open. Our doors may be closed, but our mission is still open. So what we realized was the YMCA is not unlike any other community organization in that its ultimate focus, just like the old guard, right, is to bring people together. Socialization, interaction, bring people of a common interest together. And that's what we've always done. That's what we've always been very successful at. This is what it's in our genes. It's what we do best, is bringing people together. And here we are for the first time in our history, I mean, again, after reacting to every world crisis and national crisis over a 135-year history, for the first time in our history, we couldn't use our buildings to bring people together. So we had to figure out another way. So we developed a bunch of programming and things. And first thing we did was we did phone calls. We had some staff still on board, and we called as many members as we could to check in with them to see how they were doing. Certainly, we had a large number of people who lived alone, who were elderly. We certainly wanted to check up on them. We were worried about social isolation for them. Number two, we started taking our childcare classes, and we have a large number of kids in our childcare centers across the association and offering virtual programming. So this was our first step into doing this, whether it was over Zoom or something. Get the kids on a computer and let's do something with them for a couple hours a day. Now, mind you, these parents were not paying for childcare because obviously they weren't coming. A majority of these parents were home with their kids, but just a few hours a day with their teacher brought a little sense of normalcy to these young children. I'm talking 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds during the week. And I think that was absolutely critical. Number three, we started offering virtual group exercise classes. So again, a big component of what we do is group exercise, and whether it's spinning on a bike or taking an exercise class or you name it, we started filming them. We brought people in, we filmed them, and then we released those videos to our membership. That was also well received by our members. Now, by the way, our membership total, I told you about the Berkeley Heights membership. We had well over 6,000 membership units when you factor in all of our facilities. Over 85% of those memberships were dropped by the end of May. Think about that. 85% of our members were dropped. Now, 15%, some of them are on this call today were very generous and kept their memberships and paid their monthly dues in support of us. And I'm going to talk about that charity and philanthropy in a minute. The next thing we began doing in that spring of 2020, which was incredibly significant and something that I don't think anybody could have foreseen before COVID, was the massive amount of food insecurity that cropped up in our area. We have always been in that arena, working with the food insecure, especially here in Summit. At the time, before COVID, we generally did about 40 meals a week to families. And we have a community backpack program at the Summit School District where we provide weekly, weekend meal stipulations to over 250 families once a week. And now we were working on getting food from food banks and different sources. And once we put that call out to see who needed help, we were going from 40 meals a week to 600 meals a week. An astounding increase in demand. We weren't asking questions. I don't think people were driving that far. Probably some people weren't exactly from our area. But the bottom line was people were struggling. People were really hurting. We didn't anticipate this, but we reacted quickly to make sure we could serve all those people every week, and trying to get fresh produce, trying to get some type of nutritious meals like chicken and things like that, and not just non-perishables was a challenge during that springtime, I can tell you. So we got through May. And so again, we're now beginning to use video. We are ramping up our food insecurity efforts, mostly by hosting things in our parking lots with having people drive through and pick up food. And in a lot of cases, we are delivering food to people. And a lot of our staff were spending time mostly at home. Maybe if you were coming to an office here or there, again, everybody was trying to stay away from each other. I don't even think, as I look back, they were really masked at that point. We're doing phone calls, as many phone calls as we could, checking in on our members, even if they had canceled their membership, just to check in and see how they were doing. So around this time, May and June, many of you may recall one of the first moves that the federal government did to help support businesses, including not in that or nonprofits, was the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. And we applied and we received our first PPP grant in June. I paid for 12 weeks of the people I had on my staff. Not all of them, but most of them. We were able to use those funds, and for us, that was well over $1 million. And that was badly needed. I can't tell you how much that was badly needed. And I will talk about the budget in a little bit. And then in June, we got word through the state and the, I believe it was Health and Human Services, that had announced that childcare centers could open up on a limited basis. And when we go back and you think about COVID, one of the silver linings to me is that I believe government officials and society overall began to take a greater appreciation for childcare. Because here we were trying to get the economy started and trying to get people back to work, yet in this state, childcare centers were not allowed to be open, which effectively discounted any adult who had children under the age of 7 or 8 from going to work if they could not work remotely. So this was a big step for us. Our childcare center over here at the London Circle closed with over 285 kids from infants through kindergarten. We opened up on June 13, 2020, with 31 kids that came back. Crazy. We called up all the families, and majority of the parents were working from home with their kids, and they knew that was not the ideal situation. But again, it was June of 2020. There was clearly, for majority of the families that we used to serve, clearly an overwhelming sense of anxiety of the unknown about what this COVID illness could do to kids. So nonetheless, 31 families did send their children to our center. We were able to bring some more staff back for our child care centers and open up. At the same time, we received word that the state would allow us to have limited camp, summer camp. When I say limited, the restrictions were probably 45 pages of things that we could or could not do with these kids in the summer. Mass, social distancing. Instead of 12 kids in a group, it had to be 4 kids in a group. If you were sitting on a bus with 50 seats, you had to sit in every other diagonal seat. So a 50-seat bus, yellow school bus that we all know, could effectively only commute 12 kids at a time. Staff had to be tested. It was just that the regulations and the restrictions were insane. But at the time, we had to do it because we know that these families were going stir crazy with their kids inside all day and had to get them out. A typical summer camp for the Summit Area Y serves probably 3,000 kids a summer. That first summer, we had 361 kids in 2020, and we probably had the capacity to do 362 kids. We actually turned some people away just because the restrictions were so difficult. We lost money. Our childcare was not making any money. Our summer camp, we were losing money by running these operations under these strict restrictions. And then the last thing we started to do in that late spring, early summer of 2020 was outdoor fitness classes. Again, something we never thought we would do. It was a brainchild of everybody else during that time. Was we figured we could still bring people together, but they had to be outside. So you may recall that one of the executive orders in April and May was like basically stay inside. And by June, people realized that being outside during COVID was somewhat safer and would not transmit the illness as bad as people had originally thought. So we started doing spinning classes, group exercise classes, any type of class we could get outside in our parking lots of Berkeley Heights and Summit facilities. We don't have too much grassy space. We organize walks, we organize membership runs, whatever we could do to bring members together. And now, mind you, we had a very small membership base, but this base was hungry for fitness and wellness and to get outside. Then we hit what I call phase 3, which, those programs ran over the summer, childcare slowly ramped up. And in January of 21, almost a year later, we were allowed to open our doors to limited membership. Everybody had to wear a mask. Social distancing was strongly enforced, but we were able to open up our fitness centers and our pools. And ironically, one of the first scientific studies that we have found was that swimming in the pool with chlorine was actually a deterrent against COVID. COVID could not be transmitted in chlorine. So we tried to sell that to our members that they were safe. Because obviously you could not wear a mask in the pool. At this time, we started receiving additional funding. I want to talk a little bit about the finances again. We did receive in early 21 our second Paycheck Protection Program payment. And then the federal government also began making available something called Employee Retention Tax Credit, ERTC. And essentially, this was paying a large amount of money for every staff you had on our payroll. So again, going back, the government was strongly trying to encourage businesses, nonprofits, for-profits, to keep as many employees as possible on their payroll and pay them. And they were trying to subsidize as much of that as possible. Yet the irony is, on the other side, we were in a state that was severely restrictive. And I'm not being political by saying this, I'm just laying out the facts that we were usually one of the last states to lift any sort of restriction, whether it would be indoor use of fitness centers or childcare center restrictions, et cetera. So while we wanted to bring a lot of our staff back, we simply did not have the capacity to run larger programs that would require it due to the state restrictions. A good thing was philanthropy was definitely on the rise. So in addition to the significant grants we were receiving from the federal government, we saw local, regional, and national foundations, individuals, groups contribute money to our cause. And as I talked about in the beginning, our ability to shift our mission outside our doors played a large part in that. Whether it was supporting our food insecurity efforts, supporting our ability to safely run programs by providing sanitation and barriers and masks, these funds were badly needed. Going back to the budget, in 2020, the Seminary Y had a budget of 18 million. That was what we planned on having. We ended up making $6 million. Almost $1.5 million of that was from federal grants. In 21, our budget went from 6 million to 10 million. In 2022, our budget went from 10 million to 14 million. And in 23, we are here and we're not quite 18, but we're very, very close. We're hoping to be back. So I hope that we have the full circle of the finances where by the end of 2023, a full 3 years later, we'll be back where we started financially. So in September of 21, gyms were allowed to fully open. There were restrictions. We had a lot of decisions to make about how we would operate everything. Many of our members did not feel comfortable working out with masks. Many of our members were uncomfortable with not having some type of social distancing. We decided to place as less restrictions as possible in our buildings. We encourage people to wear masks. We encourage our staff to wear masks. Everybody on our staff had to get tested weekly, but we did not require COVID vaccinations from our membership, and we did not require that they wear masks. We took their word that if they were sick, they would not come in. This was controversial back then. It may be controversial today, but we wanted to show that we trusted our members to do the right thing when they came into our buildings. So I'd like to talk, as I start to close up here, a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned. Number one, advocacy is absolutely critical. I am involved as a YMCA leader with the national YMCA and the state YMCA, and a lot of things that have to do with politics and advocacy. And one of the main lessons that we learned during COVID was that our politicians did not understand everything that we truly did. We take responsibility for not adequately educating the public and our politicians on what our mission and our impact is. But trust me, they heard us loud and clear during COVID, and they delivered and helped us in many ways that we badly needed. Number two, as I briefly spoke about, I believe that people realize how essential childcare is. The industry is incredibly important to helping the overall community get back to work. Number three, philanthropy and charity is absolutely critical. As a nonprofit, we lost money in 20 and 21. In 22, last year, we were lucky enough to have a small margin. In 23, this year, we think we'll have a healthy margin where we can start to reinvest again after several years of not investing in our facilities. But without that philanthropy and that support, we would have been in dire, dire straits. Another lesson we learned is that people are different when deciding when to come back. So I talked about 85% of our memberships have left. We opened up 2023, January, last month, still February, identical membership numbers that we had in March 2020. Almost 3 years later, we have come full circle where we have the same number of members as when we closed in March of 2020. However, many of those members have not come back. They have just been replaced by new members, and that's okay. Our second tagline during the pandemic was, "We are ready when you are ready." One of the first things we learned was every member has their own personal values for determining whether or not they will feel safe or ready to go back. And another big lesson we learned, and I thought about it when you played the video at the beginning of this morning, but it was really a surreal time, and everybody well remembers this. In the middle of this pandemic, this Y has always had a bend for advocating for the community, especially when it comes to diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And as we all recall, in the middle of this pandemic was the George Floyd murder. And that was a great opportunity for our organization to respond, especially with our young teens and young adults. And several peaceful protests and discussions were hosted outside of our buildings during those weeks after the George Floyd murder. I'm very proud that we were able to host that. Everything was peaceful. We brought people of all kinds together in Berkeley Heights, New Providence, Summit to discuss what was and continues to be an awful scourge in our communities. And we wanted to let our young people lead those discussions. Some of the challenges that we learned coming out of this is, as I started, how can a place built on socialization survive without people together? Number two, the competitive forces of virtual fitness. Many of you here are smart enough to know in the business world the story of Peloton. Peloton was already carving into our market before the pandemic and was selling like gangbusters in the first year or two during the pandemic. As we reached out to members or people who used to be members, I can't tell you how many times I heard, well, I got a Peloton, so I work out in my basement now. Or I bought my own gym set, so I work out in my garage now. How were we going to survive if everybody was going to be content staying home for their physical fitness needs? Another challenge was mental health. And this continues, as we know, to be an issue today. Those children that we work with virtually, we believe we helped them in some way at that time. Back then, we realized that a 3, 4, 5-year-old would probably have their first memories be of going to classrooms where everybody wore masks. We wanted to try to provide as much normalization as possible for those children during those early days of childcare and summer camp. And while those programs today are back and probably even bigger than they were before COVID, we clearly see an epidemic of mental health among our young people. And we, adults, are not to be exempt. The impact of this pandemic has really touched people in different ways that I believe we're only beginning to understand. So our Y has set out again to do what we can to help our community overcome some of these challenges with mental health. And we go back to our original triangle of the YMCA logo: mind, body, and spirit. And we encourage people to come together for spirit and to exercise for body, because those two things help the mind. So I think I'm doing okay here. At this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions or have any discussions. And again, I tremendously appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about the last few years in the Summit Area Y.
Okay, Bill Tittle, you're first out of the box.
Boy, that was just a very impressive talk. I'm all choked up here. You did such a great job. But I'm going to tackle a rough one, and it's political, but you know, we're all friends in the old guard, and we can handle this. I loved everything you said, but I just have a question about your philosophy of we're ready when you're ready. And I think you're absolutely right that everybody has to have the freedom to make their own choice. But I'm a scientist, and I have some scientific knowledge, and it kind of worries me. We're through this one, but let's say the next thing hits you, and it starts out, we don't know, we don't have a vaccine, we don't know what's going on. Would you repeat that philosophy? I guess in early days you were following advice. The government told you shut down, so you shut down. So maybe it's a moot point, but if the next time it happens, we're going to have the same bipartisan thing here. There's been this big report that masking doesn't do anything, you know. Boy, I'm getting all mixed up here. You know my question?
Yeah, I think I know where you're going, Bill. And you're exactly, you defined that sentiment during that time. It became political, it became controversial. And as I talked about during the second wave, when local health and state finally said we can open up our centers, we had the option to put different sets of rules in. And our decision was to allow people to make their own personal choice. And we are a non-political organization, so I certainly wasn't going to try to align with anybody politically, but we were just trying to give everybody the individual freedom. I mean, listen, like I said, I grew up in Westfield. I'm a Union County kid. I'm a Jersey boy. I've been here my whole life. One thing I know about this community is overall, we are a pretty sophisticated group, and I feel I can trust the community at large to do the right thing.
Okay, thanks a lot. God bless you.
Jim Blaine?
Yes, hi. thanks for a really fascinating talk. You mentioned about your food insecurity activities, and that reminded me of a recent talk we had with the Mercy group from Summit. And she talked about all the food insecurity work that they did. And I just wondered if you worked closely with them or if your work was totally independent of them.
Yeah, is that the Grace? Is that Grace you're referring to?
The great, excuse me,
Yes.
Grace.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Amanda and Grace, we're all working together. We have funding from community organizations. We are working together with food banks. We're trying to pool all our resources to get as much food out as we could. So yes, there were multiple community collaborations with the food insecurity. I don't want anybody here to think we did it all by ourselves, because it took a village.
Okay, thank you.
Let me say something. Paul, welcome back. Another great talk. We heard the part one of your COVID story, and now we've heard part two, and it's great to hear that you're in a good place. It's been quite a challenge. We're interested in kind of what's happening moving forward, and I'll tell you that Pete Bolton tossed out a teaser to us and suggested that maybe pickleball has become a thing at the Y. So you might say 2 words about that. But before I give you the mic back, I would like to say 2 other things, which I'm afraid slightly violates our rule because they aren't questions. But one is, I think Bill Till just mentioned something about the report in the New York Times that masking doesn't work. And I will tell you, there's an email circulating at Old Guard right now with a rebuttal from Bob Martin, who is really an expert. And he assures us that that article in the Times is totally bogus and that masking really does work significantly. And maybe that will show up in the news. And the other thing, Paul, I'll remind you, I said this before when you spoke to us the first time. A lot of our guys don't know, but the Summit Y was the incubator for Old Guard.
Yeah.
Way back in 1930, and we have the founding documents. The founding documents were signed in a conference room at the Summit Y, and for 25 years, the Summit Y hosted us for free. And so you incubated us, and we remain very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Peter and gang, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in America, and we are struggling to keep up with that. Number 2, sneak preview. I will give you a somewhat surprise announcement. We're not talking much about this publicly, but we're about to undertake a significant renovation project at the Summit Y, Memorial Day to Labor Day. About a $4 or $5 million project, and something that was put off during COVID that we're getting back to. So hopefully in the fall, winter, perhaps we can get a bunch of you guys there to check out the new Summit area Y. All right, John, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what's the membership costs?
Well, it depends on what level you are, right? So, everything from a teen to a young child is $90 to an adult is about 400 and don't quote me exactly, 450. A family membership is over $1,000 a year, and most people pay monthly for that. So our fees, if I compare them locally, are going to be lower than a Lifetime Fitness and certainly an Equinox gym in most boutique shops. But we're not going to be the cheapest you're going to find, or if you include everything all around. We try to keep our fees right in the middle, remain competitive, but also sustainable for us to provide the finest quality and services. But
Thank
feel
you.
free to go on thusay.org and you can get all the membership fees, John.
Yeah, thank you. And do you have like grace if someone's out of town for a month at a time or a couple months? Do you have that kind of program where?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and we also are part of a nationwide membership. Most Ys are. So let's say, John, that you have a Summit membership and you go down to Florida for 2 months. your summit membership allows you to use a Y in Florida for that time. And obviously, if you start to use that Y all year long, they'd ask you to pay them, and then you would just be my guest up here in Summit. You know what I mean? So,
Right. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Dave DeLong. You're unmuted, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh, a great presentation. Thanks so much.
Dave, you're very soft. Can you get closer to your mic?
Is this any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Paul, thanks for your wonderful presentation. My question is twofold. One is whether, to what extent there is a national YMCA governance organizing body. The second is that I have seen in Europe and in New York City, Manhattan, YMCAs are offering a residential service, kind of like a hotel, I suppose, but I think it was maybe around the time. Is that still something that the YMCAs offer?
Yes. And then can you repeat the part about the national Y? The
Well,
question?
is there a national organization that you
Yes.
work with?
Yeah, so the national headquarters is in Chicago. So we're a federated structure. There's approximately 800 YMCAs across the country. It's about 30 of them here in New Jersey. And while each Y had its own bylaws and governance, and we basically can do whatever we want to do. If I wanted to build a NASCAR track in my backyard, I could do that. One of the things that we cannot do, being part of a national organization, is I must use the brand appropriately. You know, that Y logo and things like that must be followed accordingly. And obviously there's several other bylaws that we must follow when it comes to child protection and aquatic safety and things of that nature. But by and large, our local board, my boss, my board of trustees, are the ones who guide the policies and strategies of our own organization. And again, our relationship with New York and New York City is just like the nationwide membership. We can still use those facilities without membership. I think that's what you're asking.
Okay, next, Miguel Velez.
Yes, hi, thank you. My question is actually fairly straightforward. In the Medicare programs and the insurances, they have coverage for a program called Silver Sneakers that I've used at some gyms and clubs like in other places. Does the Y participate in the Silver Sneakers or similar program?
Similar, AARP.
Yeah, AARP.
Yep. Yeah.
Would that give you full membership or?
Miguel, I don't want to quote exactly what it is, but it's something to the effect of, if you come in at least 3 times a month, your membership is 90% or something like that, compensated by the AARP
That's
membership.
good.
Yeah. The Silver Sneakers, for a variety of reasons, we no longer do that, and most Ys don't. It became too cost prohibitive.
Yeah, AARP is the one actually that I'm interested in.
Yeah, good.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Paul, that reminds me, I was talking with my wife yesterday about this very point, that she was a member for several years with an AARP membership. And I was wondering, she and I were wondering, with a membership like that, is AARP subsidizing it, or is the Y subsidizing it?
the
Or
Y
both?
subsidizing it.
They talk you into it, but you cover it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they're doing us a favor by organizing it. And
Yeah.
I'll point out, my wife, she hasn't signed up again. And, she wasn't using it during COVID, and she'll get back there one of these days. But she did she did mention the point about parking. So could you address that?
Yeah, it's
The
not getting any
parking
better.
issue.
Yeah, we didn't have any parking issues during COVID, I can tell you that. A new building in Berkeley Heights had 182 spaces for
Right.
free. So that's not an issue yet. Summit, boy, we all know the West Broad Street project has freed up the space that they were talking about developing between the library and the YMCA. So that plan, thank goodness, has gone away, and it's still paid parking. And we don't own that lot, the city does, and it's unfortunate, but yeah.
Okay. I mean, she used to, drive around, she was at a class or something, she's driving around looking for parking. It's a little bit like being in Manhattan.
It is.
That's
it's,
unfortunate.
Yeah. It stinks. That's all I can say. It
Yeah.
stinks. But
Okay, so your big project coming up doesn't include building an underground parking lot.
it does not. It does not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any more questions right now. Last chance. So, Pete Bolton, would you like to jump in at this point? Pete, I have to ask you to unmute, I guess.
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Paul, on behalf of the old guard, I'd like to thank you very much for a really remarkable talk. Now, we have a certificate of appreciation, and we'll find some way to get that to you. It's got a picture of an orchid, and it's, oh, here we are. You can see it on the screen.
Oh, that's great.
And of course, the orchid is because Summit was the orchid capital of the East in 1930, when we were founded in the YMCA in Summit. But I'd like to say something else, really. As I thank you for talking, a lot of things came to mind. One, you seem to have made a model reaction, really a very, very strong reaction to a very difficult and impossible to predict situation when COVID came. I think you people just behaved so well. And two, just to make it brief and pithy, we have Amanda spoke to us 3 weeks ago, and a lady, Arena, who's starting physical therapy for children without insurance, spoke to us last week, and you spoke to us today. And it just makes me feel so much differently about New Jersey. I'm a recent addition to New Jersey. I came here in 2013. And I always thought of New Jersey after the Turnpike as having brains and money, but you've showed once and for all that here in northern New Jersey, we have a heart. And thank you very much. With that, could we show some form of applause for Paul in his talk?
Well, thank you, Peter. My last thing I say, the one surprise I had for you all in person with Peter, we'll find a way to swap that certificate. And when I do, I have weekly guest passes for the entire Old Guard membership. So Paul and Joel, I will make sure that you're able to get those and hand them out to everybody. I'd love to see everybody come back to the Y, and so we'll make sure we get that swap done in the next couple of weeks.
Oh,
Thank you
we're on
again.
the case. We're on the
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Peter. Excellent program as you've been doing all month.